Hello, this is Amy from John Lennon's Spirit in the Sky, and today I wanted to talk about John and his father, Fred Lennon. Now, I've always found that there's been a connection, more, they're father and son, so that's a connection, but there's been such a tight parallel between the two of them. I wrote about it on today's blog. And first of all, they look alike, and that's undeniable. It's it's almost uncanny, isn't it, how much they look like? Now, I think that John, as he grew older, he looked more like his mother. And his father, he and his father were estranged. His father was a sailor. Liverpool, as you know, was a port city, so it was a direct, you know, port to the rest of the world. It was a gateway to the rest of the world. So his father, I'm sure, loved that. Loved traveling, loved going out on the ocean, loved being just a free guy. And even though he had married Julia and she'd gotten pregnant, he still had that pull to go out into the ocean. And he made money doing it, obviously. So, but I think in his heart, that's what he loved, was being out in the sea. Um, when he went out, I'm assuming that Fred Lennon had a lot of women. Not so good for a married man. But see, the parallel there is that when John became a Beatle, he had a lot of women, and he was married too. It's not so good, but that's how it was. And John and Fred was, I would assume, again, I'm making a lot of assumptions, but this is from, John's spirit. What I'm getting is that his father was a sort of a quasi celebrity around the world, where all the ports with all these women everywhere, a romancer, a charmer. And John, as a Beatle, was the same way, but a huge celebrity, very well known. But they both had that element of that charm. Both had that look, a very unique look and a very unique voice, and they both had the same voice. They shared so much, and so they had their first marriages with the child that ended, and they went off, and then they had a second marriage, very controversial, both of them very controversial marriages, and had another child or so. When Fred remarried, it was to a younger woman. When John remarried, it was controversial because it was with Yoko, and there'd been all the divorce in the papers and all that. And Yoko is a very controversial artist, great, extremely. Like, to me, Yoko's artistry is like Andy Warhol, and she should be seen as such. But those parallels between the two of them are amazing to me. Not just their looks, their voice, but even their lives. And I think that happens a lot because we do sort of repeat our father, our mother's karma. And if we don't heal it, our children heal it, and so on and on until it is healed. I'm so sorry. In the background, I have his father's recording that he made, which John wasn't happy about because here John is in the height of his career as a Beatle, and his father puts out a song, and it seems sort of desperate, like he's riding on his coattails, which perhaps he was. But if you listen, does that not sound like the beginning of Imagine? I have it slowed down a little bit.
I'll pick up my story where I once left off. I sailed with the tides and lived on dreams. I watched the sunrise over every ocean. That's my life, that's my love, and my home.
So I slowed it down because of copyright issues, but isn't that not uncanny how much it sounds like Imagine, and their voices sound so extremely similar? In my blog, I wrote about not just the parallels between them, but you know how John had to sort of heal his heart toward his father because there was that rift. His father was gone when he needed him, when he was a child, and he'd had to decide. He and Fred and Julia had made John decide who he was going to stay with. Well, John wanted to be with his father like most sons would, could have a great time with his father, but he needed his mother. And then the irony of that was that after he had chosen his mother, then Aunt Mimi came and got him, which was not fair. It gave him stability, but it wasn't fair, was it? That he had to make that choice, a very difficult choice that bothered him the rest of his life, and then he had even that choice ripped away. So it was another time where I talk about with John that a lot of times was the control was taken away from him, and part of his evolution in his life was to learn that he had control and that he could use it and not have to use force and yelling and all of that, that he could use it just with his words, with his music, day to day, small choices to bring back his power to himself. It was a pattern that he went through. So, yeah, the irony of being taken away. And his father, this is the dark side of the relationship that no one talks about, is that his father had grown up in an orphanage because his parents died. And he and his sister were sent to an orphanage. And so he was not cared for very well and had sickness. And Fred Lennon had not grown properly. He had a crooked walk and was shorter than he should have been. So John had this fear of people who had, physical defects. And he would cringe and try to avoid. And he said that people would, at the concerts, they would stick them in the front row because this was like, a special treat for them, obviously. And he wanted, John had a big heart. He wanted to do this. But the problem was it was triggering this fear that he had of being like his father. You see what I mean? He had this terrible fear of being like his father. People don't talk about it, but it was a very dark fear that he had. He did not want to relive that, and he did evolve through that as well. He evolved through it. Even his hair, photographers would photograph him, and if his hair was back and it showed his hairline, John would freak out and go into a rage because it looked like his father, and he did not want that. So there was a lot of things that sort of an unhealed issues that went way beyond just his dad being gone. It had to do with so many things of this fear of the unwanted child who would end up in an orphanage too, crippled and malnutrition and unloved. And So moving on from that, when he got older, second marriage and all that, starting to get balanced in his life, John's father was in a hospital dying. And I believe that John did at that time heal the past, heal his heart, forgive him, send him flowers, and they had one last conversation. And I wish that I could be a fly on the wall, although it's none of my business, but what was said. But I mean, wouldn't you just love to know what these two men said to each other? So that's my story about them, John Lennon and Fred Lennon, father and son, the tale of two Lennons, and the parallels of their life and the karma that they both had to heal together and apart, and how really alike they were. And although John didn't talk about it very much, this relationship and this fear, and it affected him a lot, and he did have to heal from it. And it wasn't just his mother that he healed from throughout his life, it was his father, and how much it contributed to his growth, his flaws, his evolution, and then going on to his children, what he passed on to his children, which I would safely say that they have healed that karma that he and his father had tried to work through in their life. But yeah, the story of John and Fred Lennon, who I'm sure now in heaven have really probably singing a lot of songs together. Oh, and that was one of the last things the last thing I wanted to say was that when John went out, before he died, he went on a ship. that she calls the Mary Jane, but it actually was the Megan J, I believe. And he sailed with a crew to Jamaica. And there was a storm, and the crew got sick, and the only one left that could handle it was John, Mr. Liverpool, son of a seaman. And he held onto that wheel and steered the ship through the storm and yelled and screamed at God and sang sea shanties. And it was a moment where John realized that he did have the power, he did have control, and he also lived out his fantasy of being on a ship and being at the helm and being free. He was free. And it was also his anger at his father and his anger at God, which represents for a lot of us a father figure. And when he did that, he was able to heal all of that. And it was a lot like that moment when Lieutenant Dan, or Captain Dan in Forrest Gump, has that come to Jesus moment. And that's exactly what John did, and that was right before he died. And it was exactly the moment he needed to see that he was a strong, healed, complete person in control of his life. And he came to his higher self and an awareness of the power that he had, that he was not a lost person. Yeah. That he was strong. He was strong in his own right. So that's the story. That's my commentary on John and his father. And thanks for listening. Bye.